Ever noticed how in Halloween movies it's always a skeleton coming out of a coffin rather than a casket? Or how when famous people die and their funeral service is put on TV, they're always in some ridiculously lavish casket rather than a coffin? The point I'm trying to make is that coffins and caskets are two different things. So like and subscribe and let's talk the difference between a coffin and a casket. The shape. First up, let's start with the basics. A coffin is tapered to the body and it's wider at the shoulders and narrower at the head and feet and has 6 sides. A casket is a rectangular box, so no difficult carpentry angles there, and has 4 sides. Opening. Generally speaking, a coffin lid is completely removable. You just lift it off and set it aside. A casket, on the other hand, has a hinged lid, so it kind of opens up like a book. In Australia, usually the hinged lid will be complete, as in the entire lid comes up. But in many countries, it's common for only half the lid to come up. This is because open casket funerals are more common elsewhere, and this way they can show the top half of the deceased. Something about showing the feet of the deceased really freaks people out, I guess. But it also helps in the "they're just resting peacefully" mantra that can be comforting. History. The word coffin has been used since the 1500s to describe a box for burying a corpse. In saying that, in England only the wealthiest members of society were buried in coffins at the time, with everyone else simply being wrapped in cloth. This changed in the 1700s when new laws were passed in England that allowed people of all classes to be buried in a coffin. When new settlers went to the USA, they were happy to follow the rules of their motherland, and coffins were used to bury the dead in the USA as well. The word casket has only been used since the 1800s to mean the same thing, a box for burying a corpse. Originally, casket meant a small box or chest used for keeping jewels, and it still does. But the word took on a new meaning when funeral directors in the USA during the 1800s wanted a kinder, softer way to speak of a coffin. The body was now to be seen as a precious jewel, something to be protected and encased in something befitting of jewel status. They also started using phrases like passed away instead of died, and mortician rather than undertaker. All these changes in wording was a brilliant piece of PR work, and the start of a culture of death denial and anxiety that continues to this day. Well, pros and cons, I guess. In Australia, we generally just call them coffins until around the 1900s, when the funeral industry really started to take off during World War I. Then caskets started to show up and funeral directors started saying caskets instead of coffins for the same reason that their US counterparts did. Today you will hear people use either word, although they're usually not aware of the difference in product. Culture. And history leads us to culture. Some cultures such as the US prefer caskets, while others such as Israel prefer coffins. In parts of Ghana, caskets are seen as status symbols, while in Nepal, those Buddhists that aren't cremated prefer coffins to show that they are humble. Here in Australia, you can get your hands on either just as easily and no one bats an eye. It really depends on what it means to you, your culture, and what your culture has put in place for you to actually get your hands on. Cost. As you might have worked out, there is a price difference between the two, but it all depends on what you choose. If you want a lavish casket made out of the best wood, most luxurious fabrics and all that, then yeah, you're gonna have to pay for it. But you can also get very basic versions that are still buffed and polished with handles and everything for a fraction of the cost. And I'm sure the deceased isn't going to complain. Similarly, you get a basic pine coffin, real old school looking, for cheap. But you can also get lavish ones that'll cost the earth. But yes, a high-end coffin still costs less than a high-end casket. I hope that clears things up a bit. To be clear, neither is better or worse. They are both just boxes. Choose whichever suits your need at the time. And with that, go talk death.